This is America. Don't catch you slipping now. Don't catch you slipping now.
Only let a certified mechanic repair or alter your vehicle.
1, 2, 3, make it.
Let's leave innocent information to the experts.
Make it.
Rules are there for your safety. That's riding in style.
Make it.
Remix the rules, remix the flavor. New tropical Sprite remix.
Sprite remix isn't Sprite. Blood purity. Black Americans are a creolized ethnic group in North America. Black, when applied in this context, is an ethnic group. It is the socio-political, socio-cultural, and ethno-national identifier for the formerly classified American Negro. Let's talk about the radicals in the delineation movement pushing a neo-limpieza de sangre. Remember this first though. Race says, "What are you made of?" Ethnicity says, "What have we become together?" One divides, the other delineates. Ethnosocially is definitive of our category. Follow the logic. When three distinct historical groups, we'll call them A, B, and C, are persistently classified, governed, and socialized together under one set of conditions, something new is created. Let A, B, and C each represent a distinct source of our lineage. The union of these three under shared law, status, phenotype reading, and cultural formation becomes S0 equals A union B union C. Once this fusion develops its own name, institutional and cultural memory, and internal self-recognition, it ceases to be merely A, B, or C. It becomes a closure under those shared parameters and conditions. Black 0 equals closure of S0, curly bracket law, custom, phenotype, oppression, culture. Over time, internal recombination, shared experience, and cultural consolidation transform it further. Black A, the evolving category. The logic here is simple but easily missed. A category can emerge from repeated external classification and shared social life. When A, B, and C were treated as one people through law, custom, and perception, a new identity formed. Once that identity developed internal self-ascription and cultural institutions, it is no longer a mixture. An ethnogenesis formed, and it is its own ethnosocial category. Black was never a mere sum of parts. It was a product of historical convergence codified through parameters and continuity. Now comes the test of coherence. Suppose D is an external group that later mixes with Black A, producing an offspring O. There are two essential questions. First, does O meet the historically enforced social read and community rule for Black? Meaning, does society read them as Black? Do they experience life as Black? Do they share its culture and self-identify accordingly? Second, does counting O as Black preserve the meaning and continuity of Black_A, or does it dilute the category until it collapses into an undefined mixture? If both answers are yes, O belongs to Black sub T+1. If social read fails, O is not socially treated as Black. If category integrity fails, the label dissolves into vagueness. As you can see, it is not about purity, it becomes fixed in coherence. A simple metaphor captures this perfectly. Imagine mixing apple, pineapple, and peach juices together. That fusion produces a new drink called Black. It has its own taste, name, and brand. Now imagine mixing that new drink with strawberry. The question isn't whether the juice is pure, it's whether the resulting taste still reads as Black. If people sip it and still recognize the flavor and label, it remains part of the family. If the strawberry overtakes it so much that no one recognizes it, it's not Black anymore because it's a new blend, influenced by Black but distinct. Categories work like that. They are not ingredients, they are recipes with names, histories, and recognizable patterns. Sprite Remix is still part of the Sprite family, but it is not the original Sprite formula. The core product is what defines the brand's integrity, while Remix represents a derivative version that exists because the original existed first. Biracial or mixed Black Americans are like Sprite Remix. They were absorbed into Blackness and are within the broader family of Blackness, but not identical to the original formulation that defined its cultural meaning. They are related, connected, adjacent, yet compositionally distinct. This is not exclusion as it is structural clarity. They belong within the family, but they do not redefine the core that gave rise to the family itself. Black is a category, not a rule. That's the difference between category logic and rule logic. Categories describe, rules dictate. Categories evolve through shared history and recognition. Rules impose boundaries through mechanical criteria. When people say, you are only Black if you have this much blood, they are using rule logic. When they say, you are Black because you share our ethnicity, culture, history, and condition, they are using category logic. The former is colonial, designed to control and divide. The latter is self-defined, designed to describe a lived social reality. Blood purity collapses category logic into rule logic. It takes a social category forged through historical convergence and redefines it through biology. That is the same racial essentialism that colonial systems use to justify slavery and segregation. Once you start speaking of pure Black, the point of reference from that category becomes absolutely vital because you've accepted the premise that race is biological rather than social. And when that purity logic enters delineation debates, it doesn't protect lineage, it contextually undermines it. Here's why. When Black becomes a rule tied to purity, in this current false model, Africa becomes the ultimate certifier of authenticity, the pure source from which all others are derived. This instantly flips power. Africans become the gatekeepers of real Blackness, while lineage-based groups in the New World, Black Americans, for example, are demoted to mere derivatives or branches of the tree. Their ethnogenesis becomes something to be authenticated or invalidated by outsiders. The language of purity thus empowers African nationalist or Pan-Africanist frameworks while delegitimizing autonomous delineation. It reframes lineage identity as an offspring of Africa rather than a people forged in their own right through a unique historical process. It also blurs political boundaries. If Black equals genetic purity linked to Africa, then all people of African descent, regardless of history, are placed in one universal racial pool. This destroys the political leverage of delineation, which depends on specific lineage and condition, not generalized appearance. A people's historical formation becomes irrelevant once the metric is reduced to blood fractions. Purity dissolves sovereignty. That's why delineation must stay historical, not biological. It defines a people by the convergence of ancestry, law, and shared experience, and not by measurable essence. Black in this framework is not a genotype. It's a social reality that crystallized into a cultural and political identity. Reducing it to just blood abandons the very logic that made it possible. Racist essentialism hides inside purity language. It assumes racial identity is determined by unchangeable biological or moral traits. Black people are X by nature. Mixed people are Y by nature. This is the same colonial logic that categorized humans as types of organisms. It replaces lived history with biology. It makes Black a species rather than a people. To illustrate the difference, compare frameworks. Delineation defines identity through shared history, cultural continuity, and social condition, a logic of self-definition that builds sovereignty and coherence. Essentialism defines identity through blood, skin tone, or racial essence. It becomes policing a logic of colonial science that destroys cohesion and flattens identity. Essentialism pretends to defend authenticity, but in truth it reinstalls the colonizer's racial taxonomy inside a liberation project. It's a parasite disguised as protection. That's why purity talk always backfires. It allows outsiders, African nationalists, Pan-Africanists, or even non-Black commentators to declare, "You are not truly Black because you are not purely African." It transfers authority away from the community that actually lived the category's creation and gives it to whoever claims the right to measure blood. In that moment, you stop defining yourself and start being defined again. The clean principle is simple. Racist essentialism reduces identity to blood. Delineation restores it to history. Essentialism is how supremacy hides inside the language of authenticity. In practice, this means if someone says biracial people can't be black because they're mixed, the correct answer is that's racist essentialism, as you're defining people by biology instead of history. Blackness is a category formed through shared law, culture, and treatment, not a genetic formula. And if someone says everyone with melanin is black, that's also essentialism, as it dissolves a people into pigment and erases the specific historical context that formed the identity. We can actually model this logically. Start with the premise, was black historically formed from A, B, and C under shared treatment and culture? If yes, do present members still share the same social read and continuity? If yes, and a new group D mixes in, ask, does social read align with black, and does inclusion preserve the category's coherence? If yes, membership stands. If not, the category becomes something new. That's category integrity. So the logic loops back to its origin. Emergent categories are not ingredients, they are recipes. Black was not assigned by nature, it was produced by history. Mixing later with D doesn't automatically make something black. Recognition and continuity determine membership, not arithmetic. A, B, and C form
Only
black.
let a certified mechanic repair or alter your vehicle.
Blood purity, therefore, is logically
Let's leave
self-defeating. It tries to defend an
to the
identity by using the language of the system that invents its racial hierarchy, just like many Africans. It mistakes coherence
Rules
for
are there
essence.
for your
It
safety.
hands definitional authority back to the very structure.
That's right.
Delineation
Writing
was
in
meant to
style.
escape. Again,
Remix
black
the
is a
rules,
category,
remix
not
the
a
flavor.
rule.
New tropical Sprite
Rules are
remix.
written to control.
That is so much
Categories
beauty
emerge to
in
describe.
being black. And
When
that's
we
the
treat black
thing
as a
that I
rule, we
guess I
surrender
get
to
emotional
biology.
about, because
When we treat it
I've
as a
always
category,
known
we
I've
reclaim
always
history,
been proud to be
meaning,
black.
and
Never
self-definition.
wanted to be nothing else.
Blood purity
Loved
doesn't
everything
preserve
about it.
blackness
Just,
at all. It
it's
erases
such
the
beauty
very process that
in
created
black
it.
people.
Because purity, by definition, cannot coexist with emergency. You cannot unmix a category born from fusion. The juice can't be unblended, and pretending it can only serve those who want to reclaim ownership over its meaning. The strength of delineation is not in unmixing what history mixed. It's pure in its understanding that the mixture itself became something new. The ethnogenesis. So the ultimate error is confusing the social reproduction of a people with the biological reproduction of individuals. The former is historical continuity, and the latter is genetic essentialism dressed as cultural logic. In short, two black parents make a black American is a rule trying to do the work of a category, and rules cannot recreate history. Sprite Remix is still categorically Sprite, but it is not just Sprite. The one-drop rule shaped the category black, but absorption into this category made it a people.